From the sky, it looks otherworldly. 12,000 solar panels encircle a 260-meter-high structure, absorbing heat from the sun and transforming it into electricity to power all parts of the country. China is the world's largest manufacturer, exporter, and installer of solar panels. More than 60% of the world's solar panels are made in China, and around half of the world's polysilicon, which is used to make solar panels, comes from the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. But the fast-developing industry in Xinjiang has attracted unwarranted attention from Western media.
Over the past few years, more than 1 million
As with what happened to the region's cotton industry, Xinjiang's solar panel industry has faced rounds of baseless attacks from the media concerning alleged forced labor. The malicious attacks take strikingly similar forms and rely on coordinated media campaigns to shape the public perception of Xinjiang and undermine an industry that plays an increasingly vital role in the world's green future. Western propaganda on Xinjiang. What's the next target? Xinjiang Daqo, one of China's largest polysilicon makers, hit the headlines in Western media recently. A Bloomberg report in April falsely accused the solar giant of secrecy and rejecting foreign observers. But their truth has another side that some would say is deliberately misleading.
Obviously had been well trained by the company to respond to this situation. Somebody from the outside, whether it be a journalist or we in the end didn't make it.
当时呢，因为是在去年疫情非常严重的3、4月份，全国进行所有相应的全面封锁嘛，可能在新疆呢。防疫的这种要求更严格，你要采访，你要有相应的报备啊，所以说在当时是根本不符合这种采访的所有的要求。
The story does not end there. At a news conference organized by the Chinese Foreign Ministry in May, Daqo invited the same group of reporters from Bloomberg to visit its factory.
我们公司是一个美国上市公司嘛。不但要满足美国上市公司所有的这个规范、法律法规的要求，同时你必须要满足中国国内的法律法规的相关的所有的要求。在这次会议上，我们也明确的表达，因为随着疫情的一个非常的这种缓和哈，欢迎任何这个媒体，按照你的程序要求，按照你的制度规范，你愿意来的，我们都持欢迎的态度。
Despite finding little evidence of forced labor during their visit, Bloomberg was hesitant to declare that its previous description of the company was unjust. Almost as if it had already made up its mind about its position on the company and its Xinjiang narrative, Bloomberg cynically wrote how the Xinjiang solar giant tries to woo the West.
Well, I think that China, and particularly Xinjiang, has been hurt in the past. When they allowed some reporters to go into the area, they twisted the stories and everything that they were shown. So what do?
Before many journalists have even been to Xinjiang, they describe it as a place of hidden secrets, unjustifiably tainting it as a place of suspicious activity.
Xinjiang is the province where the U.S. says China.
After they do visit the region, they, as if it was already predetermined, claim what they have seen as being staged or is somehow untrustworthy.
China is actively.
This distrust, generated by Western media's distorted, hyperbolic portrayal of their visits to Xinjiang, has escalated tensions and made landing an interview there increasingly difficult. In Xinjiang, 4 factories, including Daqo New Energy, GCL New Energy, East Hope Group, and Xinta Energy, are expected to produce nearly half of the global polysilicon supply in 2021. Our film crew sought interviews from all of them during our trip, but only Dakho and Shinta responded to our requests.
就说我们现在这个答复我现在已经请示过了，所以说可能确实对不起啊，今晚实在不好意思啊，对吧？啊，行吧。
What these deceptive and manipulative reports do is sow mistrust among companies in Xinjiang. Western reporters are not giving their audiences the full and genuine picture, and so this makes the companies unwilling to let the reporters in. And so when Western reporters then claim secrecy, the vicious cycle continues. The only ones who get hurt are the people and businesses in Xinjiang.
They've learned a lesson. Basically, if they open up again to journalists without any kind of control, then they're risking themselves to whatever story they want to write. So it's a difficult position to be in.
In a story in the popular Chinese TV drama Miningtown, a group of villagers in a remote area in northwest China's Ningxia Autonomous Region go to the more developed province of Fujian for work.
那一边呢，市场需求量大，产业升级快，所以呢，人工就会有缺口，把我们闽宁村的剩余劳动力输出到福建去，
让我们的年轻人去福建打工挣钱，然后挣到钱了以后呢，回来就可以种地盖房子了。
Though they are completely foreign to the place and can barely understand the dialect, they insist on going in a desire for work to improve their lives.
You know, people either on their own volition or encouraged to go in order to advance their own situation, in order to get the well-paying jobs that will allow them much better to support their families and their people.
In a lot of Western reporting, they claim, completely falsely, that the Chinese government's labor transfer programs in Xinjiang automatically translate into forced labor. What accompanies the reports are stories about people working away from their hometowns, often faced with challenges and confusion. But this is by no means unique to Xinjiang. Labor transfer programs have occurred across China for 40 years. And this fact of life has been widely recognized as a reason for the country's spectacular economic success. The situation is the same as anywhere else in the world. People go to the places where there are jobs. The fact that there is a collective approach among communities is no different to a recruitment drive. Western media is deliberately distorting the facts.
They're looking at Xinjiang, and it's sort of the same. They're using the exact same mechanism that Western countries never had an issue with in the past. Anybody who has bought any kind of branded item had no issues buying it in the past. But now, because this same mechanism is being used in Xinjiang, now they have an issue with it. It makes absolutely no sense. It's very hypocritical.
The UK's Sheffield Hallam University published a report titled In Broad Daylight, Uyghur Forced Labor and Global Solar Supply Chains in May. In the report, the Chinese government's labor transfer program was highlighted, and Hoshine Silicon Industry Company in Xinjiang was accused of using forced labor for its participation in the program. It suggested Hoshine had tainted the global solar supply chain. Hoshine Silicon Industry Company produces metallurgical-grade silicon, supplying polysilicon manufacturers like Dakho for making solar panels. The world's top 8 polysilicon manufacturers, which produced more than 90% of the solar-grade polysilicon output last year, all source at least some of their silicon metal needs from Hoshine. Before our interview, Hoshine had never allowed outsiders to visit its factory.
就是有相关的报道说，如果有一些能江那边的一些员工，他们不愿意过来，是政府强迫他们过来的。您了解过这种报道吗？
我们听说了，但这是纯粹是误测。为什么不跟他回答几个问题？因为他那个问题是太好笑了，跟事实偏离得太远了，没有必要回答他。断章取义或者在这里面混淆视听的话，我们是不放心的。
Hoshine employs about 4,000 people. Of the 4,000, about 1,000 are ethnic minorities, including Uyghurs. When asked about the forced labor accusation, the Uyghur workers there found it absurd.
当时是怎么找到这份工作的？
当时我是在网上看到的，然后过来应聘了这个和生硅业。
那之后会考虑在这边工作吗？
肯定呀，都挺好的，都挺好的，工资方面呀，然后条件呀啥的，都各个都挺好的，都能习惯。
那么政府就是提供一个平台，或者提供一个通过一个媒介或者宣传来，这个也很正常，接受劳动局。但是强迫劳动，它肯定是违背劳动者的意愿，强行采取强制措施，那我们这里根本就不存在。
In June, the U.S. Commerce Department added Hoshine Silicon Industry Company, Xinjiang Dakho New Energy, East Hope, and GCL New Energy to a trade blacklist.
In any way, I don't even know if there's one single person who actually says, I don't want to work there, and is asked to go and work there. You know, we don't know that. I mean, we have all these statements from so-called, individuals that gotten through relatives or whatever. We don't know that. I mean, we haven't gone there. And people who do go to these factories, and I know the Chinese journalists are doing it all the time, but some of the foreign journalists probably aren't doing it much because they want to believe the narrative. And the narrative is that there is something going on which is wrong here and should be stopped. That's what they want to create. I mean, they create a bogeyman or a false image, which if you talk about it enough, people begin to think it's a reality. It's like what Germany did during the war, Joseph Goebbels and all of this. Just repeat things and long enough it becomes truth.
Western propaganda tries to shape the global narrative about Xinjiang with massive infusions of money. Funding advertorials on social media, sponsored research from think tanks and organizations. Twitter, for instance, has rolled out rules to ban political advertising, but Western news outlets have freely and openly promoted political content on Twitter.
This is a means of creating an echo, a greater echo in a story that had occurred. So if you want to create a false narrative that so-and-so is such and such things are being done in Xinjiang, you get a story in the New York Times, and then you take it to the social media, you put it on Twitter, you have Facebook, you have Instagram, and you have different people, be the same people putting out different stories on the same story under different names, which shows that there is a great intensity and interest in this story.
In 2000, China's annual solar PV installed capacity was close to 0.01% of the global total. By 2020, China was the global solar leader with a market share of 33%. Expanding renewable energy is a major direction specified in China's latest 5-year plan, with a goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. At the COP26 conference in Scotland, the US said it would work more closely with China on climate change. However, the US has blacklisted Chinese solar energy companies, hampering China's efforts to tackle climate change.
But there are a lot of people who simply do not want China to advance. And that there is a policy, I would call apartheid, to try and do everything possible to prevent China from gaining, from being able to get high technology equipment from the Western world, and B, to create sufficient social turmoil in the country so that it's difficult for the economy to develop. They're not truth seekers. They're really tale tellers.
With that power play, the US may kid itself about its weakened global influence. The trouble is that by indulging in such antics, the very future of the planet is put at risk.
And sometimes the tale is true and sometimes it's not. Most often it's not, or it's a little twisted.